All right. Hello, everybody. Super exciting. It is 8:30 over here on the East Coast. So depending where you are, I don't know what time I'm catching you. Hopefully this is a great time for you to join us conversation. I am going to be going live with Dr. Melody Hartzler. She is a fellow functional medicine pharmacist. She's also the founder of Farm to Table and Functional Med CE. And we're going to be talking about some of the misconceptions around the topic of detoxification or biotransformation. So I'm going to bring her on and get this party started on this Wednesday night. Hi,
Hello.
Melody.
Hi, how are
Hi,
you?
So real quick, let's just do a quick little intro.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your background, why we're talking about detoxification, and a little bit about functional med CE and sort of why this whole
Yeah.
idea to do this talk came up.
Yeah. So, my background, that could be a while. So, we're going to make it as short as possible. But my background is really in ambulatory care pharmacies. So, the people that are and really within that segment, even primary care. So I have been a primary care pharmacist since really residency at the VA, and then I worked in a federally qualified healthcare center, and then in a spent 6 years with that as far as a faculty position, and then also 6 years in a private practice family medicine office. And so I've really been embedded in primary care, and so much of the chronic conditions that we're dealing with in primary care have connections to toxins, especially when we think about diabetes, which has been my sort of bread and butter as far as no pun intended, the butter, the bread, but the
Gluten-free and dairy-free bread and butter.
right, and the gluten-free probably spikes your blood sugar more than the non-gluten-free. But anyways, so just really seeing the connection. My functional medicine journey started with gut issues for myself, and then allergy issues for my daughter, and then that sort of led me down finding this alternative route. And over that time, I just found more and more pharmacists were interested in functional medicine. They wanted to learn more. They wanted continuing education on it. And so that's really where our functional medicine CE business came from, or that side of the business, that side of the farm to table business. And then as I started helping educate pharmacists and found you and other people to come alongside me to do that, then more pharmacists were like, okay, how do we do this? How do we put this into practice? And so that's really where our farm to table team came to, is like, hey, now we know all this information about functional medicine, but how do we do this in a clinical practice, whether it's in an existing practice, like I started implementing it in the family medicine office, or if it's in your pharmacy, or if you're doing a consulting practice. And so we have options for our team and how we engage in those different practices. So, but as far as how we got to detox this particular conference, I think we have covered a lot of things in the past. We've covered gut health, we've covered hormones, we've covered pain, and really getting down to one of the foundational things is really making sure your body is eliminating properly and making sure your body is supported with this detoxification and biotransportation. And I think the biggest thing I hear from pharmacists that aren't familiar with this, like detox has become such a buzzword. Oh, we're going to detox. We're going to do this juice fast.
Yeah.
And it's real. And they're like, well, you have a kidney, you have a liver, your body is detoxing anyways. And it's like, well, yes, it is, but
100%. And thankful for
yes, yeah,
that.
thankful for that. But it is not doing it enough, because we have exposure to so many more chemicals than we ever did before. And so just from a diabetes example, this article was from Integrative Medicine article in 2016, but the incidence of diabetes has risen 7 to 10 fold in the past 50 years, but sugar consumption really hasn't risen all that much. I mean, it's risen, but not to like that level.
Not enough to proportionally make up for that
Right.
difference. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And so really, like, the combination of the increase in sugar consumption, obesity is one thing, but the lack of exercise, certainly contributes, the more sedentary diet. But we're learning more and more about these toxins that are contributing to diabetes and insulin resistance. And so some researchers are even labeling these toxins as diabetogens. Is
Mhm.
like diabetes with OGENS at the end,
Mhm.
but talking about how they disrupt blood sugar control, and really, sort of diving into sort of like the chemicals that are contributing to this in our, glycophosphates, the plastics, the polychlorinated biphenyls, the PCBs, the persistent organic pollutants, like all of these things have data that they increase insulin resistance. We know like Agent Orange, for example, like increases insulin resistance like none other. So like all of the patients that were exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam, like are covered completely for their diabetes care if they had any exposure by the VA and the government systems. But like, what is the level of all these other chemicals, and how are they contributing to insulin resistance? Like, have you lived close to the farm, or you are a farmer? You know, I've got people that like their diets aren't terrible. They're eating like from the earth, but their blood sugars are through the roof. And you
Yeah.
know, why is that? And so I think part of this conversation is like, how do we do a better job in managing diabetes by addressing some of these things or preventing diabetes? And the research certainly is just at the tip of, you know, the iceberg on some of
Absolutely.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so for certainly for diabetes and pharmacy is really like, we all see it. We see it no matter what type of practice we're in. So that's just one example. I mean, we know that, you know, the data for toxins and other autoimmune things is starting to rise. We know autoimmune disease is on the rise. So I think it's just a really important conversation to be had about, you know, what do we do for these patients? Where do we start with these patients? What are the, you know, big players when it comes, like part of our conference is going to talk about heavy metal toxicity, which I'm super excited to learn from Lynn Patrick, because that is just something that I feel like I know that it exists. I test for it in my patients, but like once you know, I don't know that all the pharmacists we're not going to be out here detoxing people from heavy metals, but to be able to recognize that it could be contributing to your patient's condition and find a specialist that is appropriate to help the person with that condition is really, you know,
100%. And identifying who might be at risk for that, and
yes,
how to then connect it to, okay, this is what is potentially keeping you from being able to get your target blood sugars under control,
yeah,
so that we
yeah,
don't have to keep advancing your insulin level. We don't have to keep
right,
your insulin dose, which we
yeah,
know also
yeah,
complicates their risk for
yeah,
diabetes.
yeah,
And when you say heavy metals, I think about kidney disease too. And that's a very
mm-hmm.
common complication,
Yeah,
especially in the diabetes and the cardiometabolic
yeah, so
population.
many overlapping
So
things.
many pieces. And as you were talking about all the different risk factors, I was thinking about like the granddaddy of the xenobiotics when it comes to diabetes, xenoestrogens, and essentially like plastics and
Yeah, as I drink
plastic.
my plastic water bottle.
And but that's it, right? Like that's the point. We are so
Yes,
surrounded by
yes,
these chemicals, these
mm-hmm.
plastics, pesticides, air pollution, right?
Yeah,
It's very much impossible, frankly, to
yeah,
completely avoid exposure to
exactly.
these chemicals. And I think that's what we're trying to say, is that we can walk this line where we can acknowledge that the body absolutely does a great job biotransforming and eliminating toxins. And that's
Mm-hmm.
true. But the level of exposure is at a point that we have not seen in human history. And
Yeah,
simultaneously now seeing the connections in the literature and in our own client patient cases, where
mm-hmm.
again the rise in the chronic diseases that are attributed to these exposures is not matching.
True.
So okay, so that was such a great foundation for this conversation. We want to debunk some of these ideas that you brought up. You brought up a couple of things that are, I think, worth speaking to. This idea that we don't really need to do any special detoxes. Doing like a juice fast is not what we're talking about when we're talking about a detox. You brought up, this concept of, supporting these in specific disease states. What would you say is, let's throw a couple out there. Like maybe we can trade off. You give me one, I'll give you one. But like, what would be your like top like myth about detoxification that you think we're getting wrong?
Oh, top myth. I think that the fact that like that everybody's ready for a detox, I guess, would be a myth, because we know that we really have to like open up drainage pathways and make sure we treat gut infections and things like that before people really do a hard hitting detox, especially if we're talking like heavy metals or other things like that.
Mhm.
I mean, certainly there's a level of like we call our detox program at Farm to Table a 14-day reset, because it's not necessarily going to get out every single toxin in your system or every single, possible thing. But we're going to come back to the basics of the nutrition, the organic, buying, whole foods, doing the, avoiding the dirty dozen. We're going to educate where we can on, saunas and other tools that can help with this. But realizing that this reset is just sort of to get us back on track, that this isn't the end of the detoxification process or helping someone along the way to improve their health. So I like calling it, I mean, yes, we sort of say, hey, do you need a detox? Do you need, what's going on with your symptoms? Are you feeling sluggish? Are you feeling, all these headaches, what, you name it. But I think a lot of it comes back to like the foundations of what we talk about all the time, the Mediterranean diet template, and getting, the plastics out of our reach as much as possible, doing, movement to get
Air
the lymphatic
filtration,
system,
water
yes, all
filtration,
of those
moving,
things, all of those
sauna,
things.
yep, all the
Yeah.
things.
So we never want to say like, okay, in 14 days, you're going to be miraculously better. But it's really just helping your system get the vitamins and nutrients that you need. So we do recommend some products sometimes to do with that. We make sure people are getting balanced protein and fats and things in their diet, and make sure that they're, getting all the education. But it is a little overwhelming for people in 14 days to say, okay, these are all the toxins in the world and you're
Yeah.
supposed to shift. And so we don't want to do that either. We don't want to overwhelm people. We want to say baby steps. Okay, if the first thing you're going to do is find a good filtered water source, great. Let's focus on that.
Right.
Next month, what's the next thing you're going to do? Okay, next month I'm going to stop drinking plastic water bottles. I'm going to drink out of my Yeti all day long and with my filtered water. Okay.
Yeah.
Next month, what is it you're going to do? Because it's a lifelong journey. And like you said, we can't put ourselves in a bubble of never exposing ourselves to these things. And sometimes there's certain things you just don't want to give up, right? You don't want to give up one coffee that you like from a coffee shop that you know is not organic, whatever it is.
And there's just practical implications too, right?
Yeah.
Like there's just sometimes like I've got to grab a water bottle, plastic water bottle. It just
Yeah,
is
like
the
I
only thing
grabbed
I have
this at the
access
office
to, right?
today.
Or sometimes it's cost implications. Not everybody can
Yes.
afford to have
Mm-hmm.
100% organic everything
Yes,
in their diet
yes.
day to day. So
Yeah. Or space, like reverse osmosis systems are big, and sometimes they don't fit under your sink. You live in an apartment, you don't want to install something if you're renting.
right,
So,
right.
figuring out what you can use that may be, equivalent or just close to that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of options now, which is great because there didn't used to be a lot of
Yeah.
options. So I love that
It used to
there's a
be
lot
so much
more.
more expensive. Now
Mhm.
there's more accessible,
Yes, more
price
accessible for
friendly.
sure. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So I do think that is nice. But yeah, I think it's more about like having the conversation about this is like we're helping your body. Sometimes people aren't, I guess when I said at the beginning, they aren't ready for a detox. If they're having a lot of GI symptoms, a lot of gas and bloating, a lot of, really severe symptoms, I think sometimes, correcting those GI imbalances is really important. Making sure they're pooping. Like if you're not pooping, it's not time to throw your liver into hyperdrive. Making, because everything's just going to get recycled and you're just going to feel terrible.
You
So,
just gave me my idea for another one of these myths, actually.
okay.
And the poop reminded me. I think there's a misconception as well about how we actually detoxify. Yes, of course, our liver or kidney does a lot of the
Yes.
heavy lifting, but every single cell in our body is detoxifying. But I think there is an idea that we sweat out our toxins. And so you'll see people sort of doing a lot of things like, like trying to like sweat as much as possible, or they're doing like juice fasts, or they're really trying to like push things out of their system in a really aggressive way, thinking
Mm-hmm.
that the more aggressively they sort of wring out the liquid, the more they're detoxifying. And you can't do that. Like it doesn't work that way. Your body sort of has a threshold at which it meets a limit. And then after that, it doesn't really detoxify. And one of the main ways that we detoxify is poop, right? And so
Yeah.
making sure that your gut is in order, that your microbiome is balanced, because that's a major way of detoxification as well. We actually really heavily rely on our microbiome for that. Making sure that our gut integrity is good, that the motility through the gut is good, that your absorption and assimilation of nutrients is good. All of that plays into it. And if you sort of proverbially just try to wring the towel and try to get toxins out, you're going to hit a max threshold on all those pathways, and your body is just going to go, I'm not going to dump out more
Mm-hmm.
at that point. And so then you end up
Yeah.
getting into a place where you have like enteric recirculation. You potentially like redistribute those toxins. A great example is estrogen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for folks who are not familiar, if you've got estrogen, all the estrogen that we have that we're producing is going to get metabolized, and it's going to exit through the stool after it goes through phase 1, phase 2 detoxification process. Any excess estrogen that doesn't end up exiting, and this happens a lot when somebody has constipation, for example, ends up re-entering circulation, and then that estrogen builds up, and then we end up with estrogen dominance. So this is a common scenario,
Yeah.
especially when we've got somebody with chronic constipation, but it's a great example of how that person can sweat all they want. That excess estrogen is not going to magically come out of
Yeah.
the pores. This different
Yeah.
byproducts have different ways that they go, and if we hit a max, that's it. We hit the max, and so we have to kind of be gentle in our approach and balance in our approach in support of detoxification.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this whole concept of like the estrobolome, which is like the estrogen microbiome interaction, and how the microbiome is actually having these complex interactions between the steroid hormones, the other organ systems, and sort of, how it all works together. So it's super fascinating that, if people are missing certain bacteria in their gut, that can affect their estrogen detoxification, and other reactions. The whole like individualization of the microbiome stuff right now is just like blowing my mind. Like there's like oats, for example, like if you're missing a certain bacteria in your gut, like you may not get the beneficial byproducts of eating oats that are known to be like why we tout oats as like heart healthy or have
Yeah.
in the past. And so just reading things like that, it's like, oh my goodness, well, that's probably why some people's blood sugars spike crazy high after they eat oats, because their bacteria aren't there to eat, the oats and do the GLP-1 process and all this stuff. And so it's just really fascinating that, when we get down to the nitty-gritty of what's going on, that the microbiome plays such a huge role. And I think, again, we're on the tip of the iceberg and like how we actually use this in clinical practice. But it's exciting to see that we're, starting to look at those differences and how they're playing a role in health.
Absolutely. That's such a great example of sort of that nuance to the conversation about detox. It's so much more nuanced than just saying, oh, we're just going to do a fast or a juice cleanse or a water cleanse or whatever crazy tea or concoction there is out there that purports to support detoxification. And I really love this conversation about the microbiome and what's happening in the gut, because that's a big part of whenever I think of somebody who has had exposure to toxins, somebody that might be either on the cardiometabolic continuum,
Yeah.
experiencing some other hormonal disruption as a result of environmental exposures. The first thing I'm going to do is address the gut, address the microbiome. And I've got to say, in my experience, 9 times out of 10, there is something going on in the gut. They don't
Mm-hmm.
have, like, there's either some dysbiosis, some digestive issue, some IBS or constipation, something's going on there.
Yeah.
And to your point, they're just not using the nutrients in their foods the same way. And then that, as a result, is either impacted by or impacting their ability then to handle those environmental toxin stressors, whatever they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
absolutely. Do you have any other good ones? Like any other things that you've heard that, as we talk about detoxification, some of the misnomers or misconceptions?
I mean, what do you think about these like people talking about detoxing through your feet? And there's like these detox like pads and like, I mean, I guess for one way, I do like, you have skin on your feet, right? You can
Sure.
absorb things through your skin. So I totally get that, because I have literally, I was like so sick one time and I was like, I'm going to try this thing. I'm going to put garlic in my socks. People swear by it. I
Yep.
could taste the garlic in my mouth from the absorption of it through
Yeah.
my skin and my feet.
Yeah. That's
but that's
interesting.
coming like in my body. So I don't know, like, I mean, I don't know. Tell me what you think about that, because that is just to me like a little bit like,
A friend of
like,
mine sent me like a screenshot from like, I don't know, like a Facebook post or something of like
yeah,
about that, where they're doing like foot soaks and like onions and garlic in the socks
yeah,
and that kind of
yeah,
thing, and swearing by it and how helpful it is. Sometimes they'll use Epsom salt, sometimes they'll
yeah,
use like essential oils or stuff like that.
yeah,
Um, if I had to rate it on a scale of like 1 to 10, 1 being absolutely not, 10 being like green light, yeah, this absolutely works, I'd probably stick it around a 5,
yeah,
because it's not as dangerous, in my opinion,
for
as
sure.
some other trends and fads like juice cleanses. We were really harping on juice cleanses today, but like they are really dangerous. And for context, for folks who aren't aware, when you do a juice cleanse, whether it be like a 3-day juice cleanse or a 1 week juice cleanse or like fast or things like that are really aggressive for the purpose of detoxification, you're depriving the body of a lot of nutrients. And by
Hmm.
depriving the body of those nutrients, those are essential nutrients that are part of the biotransformation system. So you're sort of contributing and adding to the nutrient depletions that can make detoxification more challenging for the
Yeah,
body. So it's not as bad as all that, but I also not aware of any research or any like physiological mechanism that I could say, oh, I can see why that specifically targeting the feet would be useful. And maybe there's
right.
something that I'm unaware of. So being
Yeah,
that it's not dangerous and being that I'm not aware of specific research, I'd probably like stick it smack in the middle and say like, you know what, if it feels good and you feel better after doing it, great.
yeah,
No harm. You're
right.
not expensive to do. It's
Other
not
than you have bad breath if it's garlic
you.
and onions in your
I
socks.
would rather eat my garlic, frankly, if I'm being honest. And there is something to the onion and garlic for detox because it's sulfur rich, and those
Hmm.
sulfur compounds
Yeah,
help us make glutathione. They also
yeah.
upregulate other phase 2, actually, and phase
Hmm.
1 pathways. They also help to upregulate our antioxidant response system. So there is something to those specific ingredients.
Yeah, yeah.
Magnesium, when you do like an Epsom salt bath, that
Hmm.
does actually also help to support the lymphatic drainage. So
Sure.
there's something to doing a soak, like an Epsom salt
Yeah,
soak. And I would even go as far as saying that certain essential oils, depending on what you're choosing,
yeah.
and I'm not an expert in essential oils, but certain essential oils, depending on what you're choosing, could also help to stimulate
Hmm.
some lymphatic flow. And
Yeah,
you could be releasing some stuff as you're, through your pores as you're sitting, especially if it's a warm
yeah.
bath. So I would say all those things are fair, but what I would probably add to that, if you're going to do that, make sure you're also doing all the other things like dry brushing and lymphatic massage, and maybe do like a
Hmm.
sauna. Make sure you're, again, like you're hydrating adequately.
Sure.
So like, I wouldn't do it, I wouldn't say like, yeah, absolutely do it. I've never recommended it, but
Yeah.
I feel like there's worse
Worse things.
things out there. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
for
And if
sure.
anybody has any information on it, please.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things I've heard you say before also that it comes up is that people are always telling patients to remove coffee and caffeine when they detox. So tell me your thoughts on that.
Okay, this is okay. Let me admit my biases. This is my disclosure statement. I love caffeine. I love coffee. I just like I'm a snob when it comes to my daily coffee. So keep my bias in mind. Here's what happens when you drink caffeine. What's happening is you're upregulating your phase 1 CYP enzymatic system. Specifically, there's one specific pathway. I think it's 1A2, but I could be wrong about that. So you're upregulating your phase 1, and then what ends up happening is that if you don't sufficiently support phase 2 detoxification, that would be like methylation, glucuronidation, conjugation, glutathione conjugation, all of the like there's a a bunch of those. If you're not
Hmm.
simultaneously balancing phase 1 and phase 2, you basically end up lopsided. And
Hmm.
all the products that are going through phase 1 end up causing oxidative stress, creating sort of an imbalanced response that ends up creating more damage and more of a negative impact to as a result. So in that perspective, caffeine can do that. But if you're properly supporting phase 2, there's no specific reason that caffeine is bad for you, right? So you're actually stimulating phase one, but if you're adequately supporting phase two and considering the fact that you're hopefully supporting other antioxidants to support that and oxidative stress intermediate,
Mm-hmm.
there's actually antioxidants and polyphenols in
Mm-hmm.
the coffee. I don't see it as being a problem. Now, are you drinking a whole lot? What do your genetics look like? Do you have already an upregulated CYP enzyme that's making you like now you're really, really upregulating beyond even further, right? And so it makes it
Sure.
harder to keep up with that demand. Sure, there might be nuances there, but I think if somebody is keeping steady, I don't think it has to necessarily be eliminated. And I might argue that just for the sake of doing a detox, it again reminds me of the idea that you have to have a really aggressive detoxification in order to see a benefit. And I actually think the opposite. I think that if something is really hard, if the detox is challenging, it's too
Yeah.
hard, that's a lot of stress on your body. So for somebody who's used to drinking coffee and you tell them you've got to cut out coffee for 2 weeks, cold turkey, you're actually creating an added stress to the body. And that's not going to make for a very pleasant experience either.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So everyone that's going to go through our 14-day reset starting in April, we're going we're going to take this clip here and explain to them why they're now allowed to have coffee during it.
And look, if you want to cut back, and I will say, if you want to cut back, I would say switch it up for a matcha or a green tea. It's even
Mm-hmm.
more antioxidants there, a little less
Yeah.
caffeine. If you're interested in reducing your caffeine for
Sure.
any reason, I think this
Yeah.
is the opportunity. And then the question is, what are you using your caffeine as a carrier for, right? Are you adding
Sure.
a ton of sugar? How, are you using creamer? What kind of creamer are you using?
Yeah.
Opens up a larger conversation there about how you're drinking your coffee and really what are
Mm-hmm.
your end goals. And then the other
Yeah.
thing I would question is a lot of times when you do a detox, I'm trying to understand from somebody, are you relying on the caffeine to compensate for the fact that you have no energy or that your
Mm-hmm.
cortisol is low or that,
Yeah. You're not
you're
sleeping.
you're not sleeping. Exactly. So what else
Yeah.
is part of this conversation
Yeah.
that is really honestly sitting underneath all of this? It's probably a bigger priority than whether or not you're relying on
Sure.
caffeine. And the
Yeah.
last thing I ever want to do is again try to remove somebody's crutch without giving them a leg to stand on. I don't want to, if you are so exhausted, you're not sleeping well, and the only way you can get through your day is through caffeine, and I remove that, but I don't give you
Mm-hmm.
anything to support your body, that is not going to do you any favors. It's going to stress your body more. So again, I think there's balance there. I will say that whenever I do a prolonged fast, which is not a detox, just want to be clear on that. We're not doing a 5-day. It's a 5-day fasting mimicking diet, which the goal is not a detox. It's more meant to be a metabolic reset.
Yeah.
I do notice that my intake of caffeine naturally goes down. Like I can't
Yeah.
tolerate as much caffeine when I do that. So I
Yeah.
think there's something else happening that when you are being really deliberate in balancing your blood sugar and getting your energy and sleeping properly and all the
Mm-hmm.
things that also I think resets
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
tolerance to caffeine.
Yeah, for sure. I noticed my tolerance changes even throughout throughout the cycle. So
Oh, interesting. I haven't put that together yet, but I
yeah.
always assume I'm just tired. And so I just want more.
I mean, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah. So, yeah, that's really helpful because I think, like you said, we don't want to like make it a miserable experience. We want to like fold in these different interventions, the nutrition intervention, the avoidance. I mean, avoidance is the biggest thing we can do on a day-to-day basis, switching products, buying clean shampoos and
Right.
although if anyone listening to this has a favorite clean shampoo that actually works, like let me know because I'm on the hunt for like the last
Yeah.
5 years of that.
Oh my God.
If
Yeah.
I should post a picture of like the shower bottles that I have right now, like that are just like 20 bottles of
Can
things
I
that
tell
don't work.
you, a friend of mine posted on Instagram. She posted she did whatever she posted. And she was getting a ton of comments on her hair. Like everybody was complimenting her hair, and she came back and she was just like, "I was using Pantene, you guys. I haven't used Pantene in like 20 years. It's like definitely not a clean product. Not to shout out Pantene here, but." It's true.
Yeah.
A lot of the fillers and the ingredients that are in there do help to make your hair look
Yeah.
better. And so,
Yeah.
to your
Yeah.
point, it's really hard to find.
Getting that the suds part is hard
Yeah.
without the sulfate or whatever. That's
Yeah.
yeah. So, anyways, but looking for those clean switches where you can, and a lot of times the biggest things are what we're putting on our body, what we're putting on our face, and our makeup, and our lipstick. Think about how often the lipstick gets probably swallowed when you're
Right.
drinking and doing those things. So finding those. But I would say like the biggest thing for me is water filtration, air filtration where you can. Like my office, half of it is my laundry room. So I have the molecule, cool, however you say it,
Yeah.
over on the other side because it does become more damp in here because of the washer and those kinds of things. So I have my air filtration going in my office, and I found that makes a big difference in some of my
Yeah.
allergy symptoms. So
Yeah.
so figuring out what it is in your house that's working for you or will work for you. There's all kinds of different air filtration systems, and you want to know what it's filtering out.
Yeah.
Does it have a HEPA filter? All of those kinds of things to be able
Yeah.
to determine if it's the best thing. But the other thing is, just things, simple things like taking your shoes off at your front door and not wearing your shoes in your house. And it's like my pet peeve. And when people come over, I
Yes.
feel like a rude person to be like, excuse me, can you take your shoes off? I need
Yeah.
just a sign like there to say, listen, like we don't wear our shoes in our house because you walk outside, you walk on
Yeah.
grass, you walk on all the people that are, doing the lawn stuff.
I
Wherever.
have a suggestion for you on that. My friend has cute little slippers in different sizes that she
Oh, there you
lays
go.
them in front of the door, and when guests come in, she invites them to choose a slipper, and
And
so
we'll
she doesn't have
choose
to tell
slipper.
them. Yeah, she doesn't have to like tell
Yes,
them to take
that's
off their
awesome.
shoes. She just
There
says,
you go.
"You can choose
There
a
you
slipper for
go.
today."
I like that. I like that. We have like a lot of people that come over though, because we host a small group for our church. And so sometimes between kids and adults, there might be like 25, 30 people here. So there'll be a lot of different size slippers, but I love it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe for that event, maybe just get like the slipper out after the fact or something.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But I mean, like simple thing. I mean, they've studies that showed like the crap that
Mhm.
gets carried in.
Literally. Yes.
And then trying to avoid receipts, which I know is challenging, especially as a business owner, because I need to track receipts.
Yeah.
I almost want to like tell the people at the store, like, excuse me, can I take a picture of that? And then you dispose
Yeah.
it for me.
And
But
their whole
they
yeah.
do, yeah, they do
Yeah.
have BPA known to have on them. So just, simple things. I don't know. What are your like simple avoidance
I'm gonna give you
recommendations?
3 free ones and 3 not free ones, but like big win ones.
Yeah.
Okay, so my 3 free ones, definitely the shoes thing. I'm gonna steal your shoe thing for one of my free ones because it's just it is probably the biggest thing that you can do when you think about all the various exposure that you have. And I would take it as far as to go like change your clothes, like, like when you get home, like, especially if you're like working outdoors, things like that, if you've had exposure to a lot of like dirt or anything like that, try to change.
I think about that all the time. Like I lay them in bed with my kids before they go to bed and I'm like, wait a second, I was wearing this outside at the park.
Exactly.
Going, I've got pollen all over me. So like I'm at least changing my clothes before I lay and get in their bed.
Especially in the spring when there is a lot of pollen and stuff in the air. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Number 2, I would say dry brushing. I think is such a simple, easy strategy to get your lymph moving. And even face massage and doing various like face massage, like, the gua sha, like stones are really popular for like facials and things like that. All of that helps to move lymph around so that doesn't stagnate.
Yeah.
And so that I think is just a really powerful, you just need a good dry brush, and it can feel honestly like really like relaxing.
Yeah.
And I would say the third one would be third free one would be probably to hydrate.
Yes.
Because the hydration piece is really, really big, but then I'm going to attach the third free one with a investment, a really good high quality water filter. Like a Brita ain't going to cut it. You're going to have to get a higher quality filtration system. I would suggest going on the EWG's website. They actually have a specific one for water, and you could put in your zip code and it'll tell you what the levels of the various chemicals are in there. And the thing that I think people don't understand and why we harp on the water thing so much, on one hand, if you've got plastic water bottles, you're contending with the plastic, and we don't love that. We talked about how that's an endocrine disruptor. But municipal water, at least in the United States, can be contaminated with a lot of substances that don't necessarily have limits. They don't have legal limits. And so what happens, especially with fat soluble contaminants, is that they can accumulate in the body if we're
Sure.
overwhelmed by them, right? So
Yeah.
having a good water filter can protect you. It's the best of both worlds. You're not then reliant on plastic, and then you're not getting those exposures. That said, there are still a lot of communities in the United States that do not have good water access. They literally cannot drink the drinking water. So in that case, obviously the plastic's going to be your better option. So it's going to depend on obviously where you are geographically. The second one, and that could be pricey depending on the filtration system that you need. That could be pricey. The second thing would be an air purifier. I think that's probably as powerful. We think about it this way. It's like, what do you have the most exposure to? Air and water. We drink water, we breathe air. So having a good filtration system that's going to get a lot of those air soluble molecules. People don't, for example, think about mercury. We think of fish, but we're actually often getting mercury exposure because of if you're living near a highway or a busy road, for example, because of car exhaust. It settles into the soil. It can end up on your windowsill. So heavy metals in general can sometimes transplant that way. And then there's things like pesticides and other things like persistent organic pollutants and things like that that could come in through from the air quality. So getting a good filtration system, make sure that that's not coming inside. Or at least it's getting filtered out rather. And then the third thing I would say is to pick your most commonly used personal care products, whether that be deodorant. I'm a big proponent of switching out the deodorant. If I had to pick one, I would say it's the deodorant, your shampoo, your moisturizer, whatever you use the most frequently, start with that and find a replacement for that. The reason I picked the deodorant first is because it's so close to a major lymph area. And if there's particularly aluminum in that has been shown to be really detrimental. You know, the aluminum piece is a problem. The talc that's often in there is also a problem. So that's my first one that I prefer to switch out. But whatever you're using the most frequently, or whatever you feel is the most accessible for you to change at this time, start with that and find an alternative product that you like. I feel like when I started on this like swapping journey, like 10 years ago, we didn't have a lot of options. And so like, if you were switching out your deodorant, you're like making peace with like maybe being stinky because it doesn't work so well. But I think we've come a long way. And products out there. And I think people also aren't aware that your body chemistry, your microbiome also impacts your body odor. So if a natural deodorant is not working well for you, that might actually need time for your microbiome to adjust. And then after a while, that adjustment the odor or the kind of unpleasantness of it will actually go away.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy that you can feel that. Like, even I feel like if you eat a ton of sugar, you're just like, oh, that you don't feel good, and like you stink more, and like
because it shifts your microbiome. They've actually shown such significant shifts in the microbiome from sugar consumption. So it totally makes sense. And that's what we're noticing there. And also for women, different parts of your cycle, your microbiome looks different. So again, the odor that's associated with it will shift as well.
Yeah, it was interesting. Carrie Jones, who we love, just did a podcast with Greer McGinnis, which I had not heard before, but they were talking together about detoxifying and detoxing your life recently. And so check out her podcast, Root Cause Medicine podcast. But the person she was talking to was basically saying, like, pick one thing every month, like a new thing. Like this month, this is what I'm going to do. Next month, that's what I'm going to do. Like, don't overwhelm yourself. Like, you can learn in a course, like, come do a reset, like learn about it, but don't feel like you have to do that in such a short period of time. Because like you said, it is costly to figure out, and you have to do some research too, to figure out what the best air filter is and what the best water, situation is for you and your circumstance. So,
and I don't do 100% on anything.
No, yeah,
It's
I'm
just
drinking this
not
plastic bottle water.
reasonable. Yeah, it's just not reasonable. I pick my battles, and like I said, the things I'm going to use the most
Yeah.
often are going to be the things that I'm going to focus on, and the other things,
Yeah.
it's okay. Like, I'm not going to worry about it as much. Like, I
Right.
don't
Because the
worry as much
stress.
about my mascara as I worry about like the moisturizer I slap on every day.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And I think this, like we talk all the time about stress. And so if you're stressing yourself out about it more than like that detrimental harm to your body because of stress impacts your detoxification abilities, but it
Absolutely.
also, causes other havoc on your body. So we don't want people to like all of a sudden be like, oh my goodness, what do I do? But we also don't want to throw up our arms and say there's nothing I can do either. And so I
Exactly.
think it's finding that balance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think most importantly, and sort of like kind of bringing us back here to the point, as clinicians, as professionals, where we're having this conversation, I've seen both sides. I've seen the clinicians that dismiss it altogether and say, it's not a big deal, don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've seen the other extreme, which is like overemphasizing some of these, like to the point where it's like fearful, like it's
Yeah.
building that stress, right?
Like the
So,
mamas that are posting every like week in one of those moms groups I'm in about the chemtrails in the sky from the airplanes, and they're
right,
like freaking out about going outside. And I'm like, okay, like you can't control that, so you
right,
can't worry about that,
right.
right? Like, and I don't even know legitimacy of any of that anyways,
Exactly.
but like right now, like don't worry. I mean, you can't control anything that's flying in the sky, like
And
in
I
your
think, and then
house.
that, to me, that's where it comes back down to, okay, we're
Yeah.
going to do the best that we can with the big
Yeah,
heavy hitters, right? We're going to do the best
exactly.
that we can. We're going to focus on the basic
Yeah.
foundational stuff, the lifestyle factors. We're going to focus on stress, sleep,
Yeah.
circadian rhythm, movement, getting a good sweat
Yes.
on every once in a while, right? Because it's good for us for a
Yes.
lot of different reasons. We're going to focus on
Yeah.
hormone balance and insulin resistance and
Yeah.
all those basic things. And then we're going to focus on nutrient repletion, and we're going to make sure
Mm-hmm.
our diets are full of fiber and
Yeah.
polyphenols and phytonutrients and protein and
Yeah.
all the nutrients that we need in order to have, a good response. So whatever it is that's getting thrown our way, our body's then able to handle it
Yeah.
and able to get us back, to deal with it. Because we know, like, we're all living on the same planet. Some of us are handling it really well. Some of us genetically are not handling it as well. And so as we learn a little bit more about it, I think, focusing on, to your point, the things that we can control is a great takeaway.
Yeah. Exactly. Awesome. Well, yeah, if people want to learn more information, I think you had up on the screen the
Mhm.
website for our conference, but it's functionalmedicinece.com. And then you can / ref equals 97, or Lair's going to post that link as well. But that links it back to get to her. But we would love to have you. Do you want to talk a little bit about your session that you're doing there?
Yeah, so I am in the afternoon, and I am focusing on the specific nutrients. Like, how are we going to maximize, to the point I was making before, how are we going to maximize on the specific foods and how they interact synergistically with these mechanisms to optimize our detoxification. So again, I'm not focusing on the eliminating things. I might mention, when organic makes sense, but mostly talking about what are the specific nutrients, what are the compounds, what do we know, how do we support the microbiome
Yeah.
strategically, and then simultaneously, how are we accounting for these genetic variations so that we can put together a personalized nutrition protocol that works for that individual without overwhelming them, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And then the beginning of the day, anyone that buys a ticket to this conference will also get your foundational program. So Lara put together a great 2-hour session that is like top notch, like overview of detoxification, phase 1, phase 2, all
I
of the
even talk
different
about phase
pieces.
3, I think.
Phase 3, yes, phase 3. And then also, nutrients, drugs that inhibit some of the things, lots of awesome information. So that's a 2-hour CE program. And then the day of, we have 7.5 hours of pharmacist CE can be live if you join us for the whole day. And then if you don't join us, and you can't join us on May 13th, you can do that as on-demand CE as well. So we're even talking about the mindset approach with this thing with our patients, because I don't know about you, but my patients, oftentimes, like, I can tell them all the things that they need to do. And even in my own life, like, I can hear all the things that I'm supposed to do, but it's like how we shift our mindset to making action that really
Yeah.
is important. And so I think that can apply in any condition that you're working with patients in. So Nicole Grams is fabulous at mindset work. And so she's going to be leading that session. And then Dr. Kate Henry is a naturopathic physician that is phenomenal. She practices actually in the mental health space. So we actually had her speak last fall at our conference that focused on anxiety and depression. But there's so much connection between the toxins and the mental health space too. So I'm excited to hear her perspective on some of the workup and lab assessment with these patients. And then we also have two physicians joining us. Well, actually another naturopathic physician, Lynn Patrick, what I mentioned, that does the heavy metals, is really her specialty. And environmental toxins has been like her
She's like a
career.
legend in this space.
Yes, legend. And I'm just like, so just like, it's like amazing when you get these people that are just like so well known for their what they're talking about. And so I'm really excited to hear from her. So she's going to take us through cases. I feel like a lot of us as pharmacists, when we start to hear about this, we hear like the very beginnings of the connections of everything. But when it gets down to, okay, what do I do with this person? That's where we're like lost, right? And so I'm really excited. She's going to bring cases, and also Dr. Trindade, Philomena, excuse me, is a fabulous physician. She teaches for A4M, IFM, and she focuses a lot on estrogen.
Honestly, another legend as well.
Another legend, yes. So, so it's going to be a really great conference. It's a Saturday in May. So I realize May is often referred to as May-cember because it's the end of the school year and it gets a little bit crazy. So make sure if you can't join us that day that you still sign up so that you get the recordings and the CE. And we do have annual passes. So if people are really interested in functional medicine and just really want to just get all your CE related to functional medicine and not worry about having to get hours from other places, we do have over 20 hours of CE every year. We do on demand that releases throughout the year. We also have this conference, and we're having a men's health conference in the fall because we have not hit on men's hormones yet in any of our programs. So
that's going to be a great lineup.
Yeah.
More on that to come, you guys. That's
yes,
going to be
sure.
another great
yes,
one. And meanwhile,
yes.
if anybody has any questions, definitely reach out to either
yes.
one of us. And thanks so much for having this fun chat. We always have such a good time talking about these topics and getting into some of the nuances. And I hope folks, start to maybe rethink their approach to detoxification as a result. So can't wait to hear folks' comments on this.
I'm keeping my coffee. That's my rethinking.
We're all keeping our coffee. There you go. That's the big takeaway.
So, all right. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too. Thanks so much for coming on.